Okay, we are live, Vass. This is Joe McHugh and a good buddy of mine, Dan Vass, and we were both Marines. We served together at basic school, and I figured I'd bring him on the program to share his thoughts on what's going on in the world today, and we'll give him an opportunity to talk about things that are most important. So, Dan, why don't you go ahead and share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Dan Vass. I met Joe back in 2008. In 2009, we were going through the basic school down in Quantico, Virginia together. We were in the same platoon. Well, we were in the same company and the same platoon, and each company had, at the time that we were going through, each company had 6 platoons. And Joe and I happened to be in first platoon. So we got to know each other, especially since my college roommate was roommates with Joe. So I spent a lot of time in their barracks room, and got had plenty of discussions with Joe. And anytime we did any sort of field exercises, classroom exercises, table exercises, whatever it was, Joe was always there because we were in the same platoon. So yeah, I've gotten to know Joe quite a bit over the years, and I know Joe. Once we graduated from TBS, the two military occupational specialties that we selected were different, so our career paths diverged at that point.
Do you want to share a little bit about your MOS and what you ended up doing after TBS and that?
Yeah, sure. So when I graduated TBS, I think it was like July 2nd, right? It was just before July 4th weekend.
Yeah.
Of 2009, I I was lucky enough to have been selected for ground intelligence. That's the 0203 MOS. So it's kind of a hybrid between an infantry officer and a intelligence officer. And that MOS was created back in 1996, I believe it was, because they wanted sniper and recon platoon commanders to not only understand the warfighting the warfighting aspect on the ground, but also um, the intelligence side of things, and intelligence collection. Um, so after TBS, I went through infantry officer course, and then I went to ground intelligence officer course. And while doing ground intelligence officer course, I did about a month back up in Quantico at Scout Sniper Platoon Commander course, which was a lot of fun. After that, I went down to North Carolina, where I had the sniper platoon at 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marine Regiment. And I did a few, I was there for about 7 months, and then I got picked to go on an advisor team, where uh, I was day in and day out alongside the Afghan army, and we'd go out on patrols, do humanitarian missions, whatever it was. I mean, across they always talk about the 3-block war, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did that because one day it was like a humanitarian mission, bringing bags of rice and flour and things like that out to certain villages, or we would be escorting like an SF team down in to where their PB was going to be at their patrol base. So I did that, and then um, I was wounded in Afghanistan, so I got medevac from there. Did all my rehab, and my leg's good to go now, but uh, it, it hasn't allowed me to do what I wanted to do in the Marine Corps. Anyway, after that, I PCS to Headquarters Marine Corps, and I worked at the Pentagon as a program a budgeting officer. So I did that for quite some time, and I did a deployment to West Africa in 2014. There was a team of about 24 Marines over there that were training the Liberian Army, and we were the last iteration of Marines. And it just so happened that while we were there, the Ebola crisis was happening. I was not there for the Ebola crisis. I was simply there to train the Liberian army, but the Ebola crisis was happening all around us.
Mm.
I did that deployment. That was a lot of fun. And then came back to the Pentagon, continued on as a budgeting officer. And then I took up a third deployment, which really consisted of two deployments inside of one, because so I did an individual augment billet. So I was the XO of an advisor team that GLT rotation 5. GLT stands for Georgian Liaison Team. So we went to the Republic of Georgia, trained with a Georgian battalion. In my case, it was the 23rd Georgian Light Infantry Battalion. Well, I spent 4 months training with them, and then you do a 7-month deployment in Afghanistan with them.
Mm.
So that was a lot of fun. Long deployment, lots of fun though. Came back to the Pentagon and EAS'd out of the Marine Corps after that. So, and now I'm a contractor.
Now you're a contractor. Overall, good experience, would you say? Or
Oh yeah, it was great. Love being a Marine. There's nothing that compares to it. I mean, it's a big gun club, right? And it's the world's most feared fighting force. So you'll never get that experience anywhere else. And you always have that title, United States Marine, right?
that's right. That's right.
So
Yeah, I miss it too.
yeah.
We were both in Africa. That's interesting. I didn't get to Liberia, but it's
I mean, it's kind of a great thing. The Marine Corps, puts you around the world, and I didn't have to pay for it, right?
yeah,
It was part of the job. So you get to go see different parts of the world that most people will never see.
sure.
I mean, Liberia is what I think the second or third poorest country in the world. And some parts of the country are extremely sad to see, the despair and the conditions that some human beings live in.
Yeah,
And that's what a civil war does to the country, because they had a civil war ended back in 2003. Also, Georgia, a second world country. Not a lot of people are going to be like, you know what, when they're talking to their spouse or significant other, like, you know what, I think we should, instead of going to the Caribbean, I think we should go to Tbilisi, Georgia. That's really it's not really a thing. So.
all right. I was just checking it out to see if this live stream is actually working from Facebook, and it looks like it is. I'm going to test a message here to see if that shows up in our stream. Yeah, that worked. All right, cool. All right, so if any of you are watching it from Facebook or YouTube, you can go ahead and punch in a comment, and it will show up in the stream, and we'll be able to put it up on the screen as well. Dan, I want to thank you for your service, and
Absolutely, thank you for yours.
Thank you, sir. And absolutely, there's nothing quite like being a Marine and serving our nation. And you wanted to talk a little bit about, I think it was the unitary executive. Is that what you wanted to chat about today? Is that?
Yeah, and I'm open for anything. If there's anyone out there that wants to put out a comment, we can go off that thread if that's something someone wants to do. But in the absence of that, I would like to talk about the expansion of the executive branch.
Okay.
I think it is counter to what the founders wanted or desired.
Yep.
The president and the executive specifically, he is supposed to be a city manager, basically, right? He doesn't have control over the budget. Congress does. He's able to put in what he thinks, funds need to get allocated towards. And eventually Congress and the executive will agree on something, it gets signed, and then those funds get allocated. But over the many, many years, I think that the federal government has grown to an extent that the founders, it's less than desirable, in my opinion. And the reason why is because it kind of takes away the responsibility and authorities of the state. And so basically we've become a Unitarian style of government, kind of like how Great Britain is, right? The federal government is all reaching and all powerful, whereas here in the United States, your state government has say before the federal government does.
Supposed to have say.
It's supposed to, correct. And a lot of the times it does. Now there's certain things that the federal government can dangle over their head, aka money, to get them to do what they want. And they do that very easily. I mean, look back in the 80s with Ronald Reagan. The drinking age was 18.
Mm-hmm.
I forget exactly what he wanted the states to do. That's what it was. He wanted the states, because this is the state has the authority to do this.
Mm-hmm.
The state has the authority to say, hey, when you're in my state at any sort of establishment, you can drink at the age of 18. Well, the federal government wanted to curb DUIs and alcohol-related offenses.
They wanted to influence state policy is what they wanted to do.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
And so they said, hey, if you don't change the legal drinking age to 21, we are not giving you funds for your public school system.
Right.
So guess what? The schools or the state said, whoa. Okay, we are on board. We'll do it. And now all 50 states have the legal drinking age at 21 because they want and they need those federal dollars for their public school system.
Right. So they essentially federalized policy at the state and local level through the use of a bribe,
money.
Through
the use of money, yes. So I wish the executive did not grow to the extent it has. And the legal drinking age, that's just one of a million examples, right? I just don't like how, and the fact, and now that the executive has expanded so much, I also don't like how the citizenry kind of looks at the federal government. I think we kind of look at it as all powerful, all knowing, and it's just not.
It seems like the American people have accepted that as the status quo at this point, right?
No, they shouldn't.
They shouldn't, but it seems like that's what I have conversations about the security state, about the overreach of government, et cetera, and this overreach that you're talking about has been the status quo for so long that it's almost as if people have forgotten what the purpose of state and local government is supposed to be, or even what liberty was prior to the excess influence of federal government.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, similar to what you were talking about with changing state policy for drinking, the federal government has effectively done the same thing with policing. And so they have, through the use of the Patriot Act, for example, federal grants and civil asset forfeiture, they've been giving money and giving equipment directly to police forces. And specifically the civil asset forfeiture law allows, as I think we were talking about this briefly the other day, it allows police, incentivizes police to actually seize property, individual property, in violation of our Fourth Amendment rights, and in order to sell it and take the money and use the money for whatever it is that they want to do. So as a result, police departments across the country are now focusing on revenue, raising money through seizing property and whether it's drugs or whether it's money, they're taking it. And as a result, the federal government now has essentially federalized the police in doing so. So they've extended the reach of the federal government all the way down to the local level, just like you were saying they accomplished with the drinking age.
Well, yeah, I know you and I talked about this for a bit the other day. I'm not too sure about the whole drug thing. I know that's not what we're here to argue over. So I
Well, we
won't
can
get into
argue
that.
over
But
whatever we want,
yeah, I just find that hard to believe.
Which part specifically?
As much as I love to hate government, I do
Yeah.
love government, and I know that within the government there are good-hearted people doing the best that they can within their own little niche.
Sure, of course.
But so I don't want to rope everything in together. I think I would like for you to expand on how the federal government is federalizing state and local law enforcement agencies.
Okay.
So, besides the drugs, what other ways do they do that? I'm sorry.
So there are two. So two off the top of my head. Actually, three that I can think of off the top of my head. But we'll start with civil asset forfeiture. So civil asset forfeiture, for example, I saw a video on Twitter just the other day where there was an Hispanic fellow who was serving food on the side of the road. Police officer came up to him and said, "You don't have a permit," and he just basically took the guy's money. Now, that's a violation of our Fifth Amendment right to due process, and it's a violation of our Fourth Amendment right to be secure in our effects, which is property, right? So the policeman could have simply shut the guy down and said, you need to go get your permit, go down to the city hall, get your permit tomorrow, and then you can come back and be up and running. But instead, under the civil asset forfeiture laws, what he did was he took the envelope of the guy's money and took the money out and took it away from him. So it took away the guy's earnings for the day. Now, under the civil asset forfeiture laws, police are not only empowered to do so, but incentivized to do so because they're able to keep 80% of whatever it is that they seize. And if they seize a property...
Is that written? Is that
yes,
written in law?
Yes. Yeah, it is.
Officer... So you're telling me a cop down in Miami, Florida, and I'll use Miami because the drug trade and cocaine, right? And I saw a few months ago, I didn't read the article, but they had like a huge seizure, right, of millions of dollars worth of shipment. So you're telling me the guys that, and let's just call it $10 million, you're telling me that $8 million is now being given to those officers who made that raid and seized it?
That's I would have to, what I'd like to do is and I should have done this if we were going to get into it, but that is the law as I understand it. And I've gotten that from just reading about civil asset forfeiture online and various legal publications. I know that there are various libertarian outlets that talk about this. The ACLU talks about it, but I would have to find a specific example to show you where it's being used in drugs. But the articles that I read, and I'm looking for one right now, do show that is a tool that can be used, and you described it in the right way, that you can seize drugs, that the government would get, the federal government would get 20% of it, and that the 80% would go to the local government. Looking here, civil asset forfeiture occurs when the government seizes property under suspicion of its involvement in illegal activity. Let me see if I can just share this and we can read it together.
Well, the issue here is, I think, how do you exchange that heroin, that shipment of cocaine, whatever it may be, from its current form of an illegal drug into dollar bills?
Well, that is the issue. But that is exactly what
So
the issue is, and that's the
how
problematic issue there. The question is, how does the government dispose of illegal drugs that they catch? What do they do with it? Does anyone have an answer to that?
I don't actually know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have no idea.
I don't know for a fact one way or another on that either. What I do know is that I've read that the civil asset forfeiture laws allow the government to seize property, and that the profits from the seized property are then shared with the local government, with the local police department. That's what I've read. Now the question is, how do we connect A to B? And I'm not sure exactly the procedures that the government uses to liquidate
Right.
illegal drugs and turn it into cash. And that, I think, is what the
Right.
problem is.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't have an answer to that question either because I don't know. I can only imagine that those funds, when it is liquidated through whatever process, are you sure that it only goes to the police department, or is it up to that state to allocate those funds where it sees fit?
I don't actually know. I'd have to go back and find specifically. I'm looking for the actual text right now. As you and I both know, our commanding officer would always say, show me the source code, show me the text. And that's what I'm looking for right now. Justice.gov. In-person injury fines for pursuant to
Because I'm
control.
just thinking of Bad Boys, right? The Bad Boys 1, 2, and 3. I just recently saw Bad Boys 3. But whenever they do these big drug busts,
Yeah.
what does, in Bad Boys' case, it's the Miami Police Department. What do they do with that?
So
I don't know.
This is interesting. This is the link right here where I'm finding some of the information. And let's see if I can share. I'm not able to manage this to share it. But what that page specifically says is that here's the specific. This is under criminal forfeiture instead of the civil forfeiture, but the concept is the same.
Okay.
And it says right here, once the interests of third parties are addressed, the court issues a final forfeiture order. So, in other words, the property is forfeited, and we don't know how they liquidate that. At least I haven't been able to. Asset forfeiture management staff. Now, I haven't found that yet, but I bet it's here on this justice.gov website to find out what their specific procedures are, which I think it would be very interesting to find out.
So let's go back to the example of the man on, working his food truck on the street corner or whatever. He's doing everything right, except he didn't get a county permit, right?
Correct.
That said, hey, you can open this business here on First and Main Street and sell your taco stand, right? You can sell tacos.
Right.
And you're saying police came up, said, show me your permit. They're like, well, I don't have a permit. And they're like, okay, give me all your money, go away. And
Yeah,
let's just say that guy had $1,000. Those officers keep 800, 200 goes to the government, the local police, or the local government.
Correct. Yeah, here's another one by heritage.org, the Heritage Foundation.
Yep.
All right, so the Heritage Foundation, and I'll post this link up here as well in case anybody wants to copy paste it. But the Heritage Foundation shows that it's a legal tool for law enforcement to seize property that they assert has been involved in certain criminal activity.
There you go.
Right, but
criminal activity.
Well, that they assert has been involved in criminal activity. So they charge they charge the property itself with the crime, with involvement in the crime. So that means they can seize your car, your home, valuables without ever having to charge you with a crime. So your property somehow is complicit in a crime without you even being involved in it. Now, as far as I can tell, property, I've never heard of property being, my parents would always tell me, whenever I would say as a kid, where, I may have lost my teddy bear or whatever, right? Or I lost my car keys when I was a kid or whatever the case may be. And they said, well, we're pretty sure it didn't just get up and walk away on its own. So, so if that's the case, then property itself cannot commit a crime. It's the individual. So basically, through the civil asset forfeiture law, they're saying, and this is kind of bringing another topic into it, but if the police can seize your car, your home, your money, or your valuables, this to me, civil asset forfeiture, without ever having to charge the individual with the crime, seems like a Trojan horse into also repealing your Second Amendment rights. Because if they can assert that property can commit a crime, then that means that they can assert that a gun commit a crime without the individual having to be involved in it.
Before we get on to the Second Amendment here, let's stay back on what we were talking about there. So the U.S. government doesn't look at just individuals as individual entities, right? You are an individual. You are also an individual entity. I can tax you, right? You are a living being. I can tax you. Well, if that were the case, and they could only tax an individual person, how do we tax an organization? We do. We look at an organization as it is a living, breathing thing, right? So when you talk about during the civil asset forfeiture law that they don't hit the person with a crime, they do, however, say that that organization or that entity has been complicit in a crime or is conducting criminal activity. So clearly there was some sort of probable cause there.
No, that's not. That's according to the Heritage.
Assert that belief. It's
the Heritage Foundation is
I find very hard to believe that cops are going around.
The Heritage Foundation is renowned as a fairly conservative organization, and the question here shows that, what if I'm innocent? Surely they can't take the property then. And the answer is that being innocent does not mean that the state has to return the property. They're saying very clearly that innocent defense is not a constitutional defense. So I don't know how in the world the Supreme Court can possibly rule that that an innocent owner is not that the government can seize the property of an owner, and that the property itself can be complicit in a crime. That to me seems like a violation of our Fourth Amendment right to be secure in our personal effects. But all I can go off is I
would have to agree with you.
Yeah,
I would have.
Here's the other thing. It says that the success rate for winning back property is low. Cut your losses, don't challenge the state, it says. So that plays into qualified immunity, which is the other thing we were going to talk about, which is, which was passed is effectively made a law in 1967, which prohibits police officers from getting sued for negligence on the job. And then you've got the grants, and you've got then you've got joint task forces, and each of those are all what, according to the libertarian perspective, which I think is generally the liberty perspective, that those are the concepts and the frameworks that have extended federal influence down into state and local police forces, and that's effectively the security state. in my opinion. And I don't think the security state, that's the opposite of liberty. I think that we should be fighting for liberty here. I mean, you put the uniform on to fight for liberty in America, right? To fight for our Constitution and to fight for liberty and justice for all people.
Correct.
So,
and I'm all with you there. I understand now that you know, the proof is in the pudding. All the stuff that you're bringing up are great points, and they're legal points. I mean, hell, the Supreme Court upheld that the innocent owner defense is not constitutionally required. Well, okay. I just have a hard time believing that American police puts on their uniform for, you know, USAville and goes out there looking to seize property. I just don't see that. And if that were the case, wouldn't they go to the largest business entity in their local jurisdiction to look for any sort of criminal or illicit behavior that they could potentially get a big payday for?
well,
But that's not happening. So,
well, you would think maybe, but didn't you brought up the other day that you saw police departments wielding M4s with savvy plates and Mitch helmets, protecting a farmer's market, right? I mean, so what in the world is going on here?
yeah. Well, that is the militarization of the police force, which I am not okay with.
Okay.
There is a place for that, and that's called the combat zone. Downtown Arlington, where the biggest crime on a day-to-day, basis is someone running a stoplight.
Yeah.
I don't need a cop in literally a flight suit that like Delta would wear, like a Delta operator with a chest rig, his kit on, a Mitch helmet, and an M4, and he looks like he's an operator going like on the stack, ready to go take down a building. Like, it's a farmer's market, man. People are buying fruits and vegetables here, right?
Hopefully, it's
they got
organic.
Barricades at both ends of the boulevard. Yeah, that kind of irked me a bit because I was like,
let's talk about that.
This guy has bet. This local police that will never ever be able to use his gear has better gear than I do, yet I've been shot at.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you spent 10 years serving overseas. You had multiple deployments overseas. You saw live combat action, right? How do you feel about the militarization of police? Do you think it's appropriate? I mean, and what should we be doing about it?
Do I think it's appropriate? Well, I think giving a police force M4s, or as the public knows them as AR-15s, that's the civilian equivalent, is much different than giving a local law enforcement or even federal law enforcement MRAPs and MATVs. Those are on two different ends of the spectrum. Now, I have seen local police departments that have MRAPs. MRAPs, the ones that I rode all over Afghanistan on.
Right. So MRAPs for the people watching at home.
The United States is not a third world country that has gone through multiple civil wars.
Describe
a current
MRAP,
combat zone.
Describe an MRAP for the people listening at home.
An MRAP is either a two-axled, four-wheeled vehicle, up-armored, has a V-shaped hull. It's a big diesel engine made by Oshkosh, and it's able to withstand a blast of, I believe, up to 600 pounds of homemade explosives, or as we in the military call HME.
Yeah.
So it's able to take a big hit and keep everyone inside alive. Now, that's not to say that if you get hit by that, you're not going to feel it. You absolutely will. And chances are you're probably going to get knocked unconscious, or in my case, bones get shattered. and
Oh,
get
wow.
knocked unconscious. But that's okay. You don't die, right? You
You
can
don't
still
die.
live a very good life after it.
Yeah.
And a Mat V is kind of a similar thing. It's just more agile and is able to go off road and kind of go through much harsher terrain than than an MRAP is. It actually looks pretty cool too, but it also has a V-shaped hull. Has a gun turret on top, just like the MRAP. It's able to seat 4 individuals, whereas an MRAP can seat more because in the back they have more space back there. But it's just a vehicle that it's an all-terrain vehicle that can take harsh conditions and a lot of punishment.
Right. So, and now we're deploying these on American soil through, through the police. So that's not, unless they're planning on
Right.
having to deal with IEDs in American soil, that's not a.
Exactly. So, from my understanding, and this may not be totally true, but I remember reading a few years back. Now that things are ramping down overseas in Iraq, Afghanistan, we've had the government can either just leave the stuff there because it's very expensive to ship it back to the United States. So
Mhm.
to save some pennies, we just say, you know what, we're just going to leave it. But what the military has been doing is said, okay, I'll bring this back to the continental United States because Smith County, Kansas wants to buy these MRAPs. So we bring
Right.
them back, sell them to Smith County, Kansas, and Smith County law enforcement now has up armored. Well, I guess MRAPs are up armored. I mean, they got thick glass
It's a real
windows
tank.
and
Real tank. It's. I
it's a
mean, it's
real tank without a main gun
not a
on it.
gun. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's totally inappropriate for police use. Police
It
are supposed to be
is
keeping the peace. You don't. You don't
right.
need.
Not scaring the populace, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
Interesting. Very interesting.
so
So
I
so the executive reach, the reach of executive power. You want to make some comments on that? And what you,
well, to get back to that, and you know what? I know you and I talked about this. That actually is a topic that has many inroads and or in our case avenues of approach, right?
Mhm.
AKA talking points. So you could literally go on for days and hours and weeks and months about that,
Mhm.
and you still wouldn't even cover them all. But I would like to see the federal government um, shrink, shrink in size. And I know that it's no one is doing this from a bad place in their heart, right? They're not doing it from a bad place, but the path to hell is paved with good intentions, right?
That's
So
true.
you got to be careful about, you know, hey, we're doing this because for it's in the best interest of public safety, right? Or public security or national security. And you're like, well, okay. Uh, there's so many things that you could reason away as they are of national security or public safety interest.
Yeah.
And as Benjamin Franklin said, I believe it was Franklin. If he said something to the effect of, if if you're willing to give up some of your liberty to ensure a little bit of security, then you don't deserve either liberty or security.
That's exactly right.
So I think that quote can be applied at many different levels of government in various scenarios. I don't think it's just one quote referring to national security or public safety. I think it's a very industrious quote, if I must say. So
I think the quote
anyway.
is, those who give up essential liberty for temporary safety. I'm looking for here it is right here. Deserve neither liberty nor safety.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's one of my, it's one of the quotes I reference in my book that's coming up real soon here too.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
I mean, Ben Franklin has some great quotes. The guy is a genius. I mean, you could go read, what is it? Poor Richard's Almanac. Right?
mm-hmm. I haven't read Poor Richard's Almanac, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, that was written by Ben Franklin.
Was it really? I didn't know
actually, well, I may be thinking of Charlie Munger, who is the
Charlie
VP
Munger
at Berkshire Hathaway.
Yep.
And he's a big Ben Franklin fan. One of the most impressive men to walk the face of this earth. He is a genius. But he wrote, I believe, his version of Poor Richard's Almanac. Yeah.
Okay.
Because his version is called Poor Charlie's Almanac, I believe.
Ah, that's cool.
So he is also a funny guy. He's so funny that he can make fun of you and you won't even know that he's making fun of you.
Smart people have
he's one of those folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner and founding Berkshire Hathaway.
Yep.
Good guy, very smart.
So.
Okay, well, we've got, I don't know, we've been on for about 45 minutes. Do you want to make let's see if there's anyone out there, Gordon, if you wanted to ask a question or not, but you just made a comment about militarizing police being a lost cause by definition. I would have liked to have known what he meant a little bit more about that. It's too bad we're not able to invite him in specifically. But anyway, Danny, brother, it's always good talking to you, man. I really enjoy it.
It is always great. Yeah. Hopefully we can get some audience topics for a future discussion. I think that's the way to go, and I'm more than willing to do that, and I can elaborate more.
Sounds
on
great.
My personal thoughts.
Sounds good, Danny. I will keep you posted, and we'll be to have another talk, change up, and talk a little. Works. Let's see here. I have to. It looks like we are having internet stability issues right now.
Yeah. So I think we can just leave it at that, and I hope people enjoyed what they heard or saw, and please stick with us, and we can more than willing to take on your topic. So.
And we're back, and it looks like the internet decided to act up. Maybe one of the topics we ought to cover would be how the internet is now controlled by three corporations: AT&T, Verizon, and Sprint, all of which are controlled the majority by the Federal Reserve, and that the recent repeal of the Net Neutrality Act and through the FCC and the decision by the Supreme Court to uphold that could be interdicting our efforts to maintain a secure connection, which is also a violation of our Fourth Amendment rights. Be secure. In case